Channel. Thank you, Larry. So, to get started, or excuse me, rather, I encourage you to visit our YouTube channel because this is where we actually keep all of our other sessions. And if you weren't able to join last month, we had a talk with Rosa Lowinger, a conservator who helped us understand how to protect and conserve our family's memorabilia and unique building materials. So you can always go back to our channel and rewatch those sessions or watch them and share them with friends. As we go through the presentation, please keep yourself on mute and also please keep your questions until the end where we will have a Q&A session. But as I said a few moments ago, feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring those so that we can get Ennis to answer those questions for you when we get to that section. Finally, our Lunch and Learn is a free series, and we're very happy to be able to bring that to you thanks to GBX Group for allowing that to happen. Their generous support of their support and sponsors allow us to continue providing educational programs free of charge to you all. So if anyone would like to sponsor in the future, please hit us up. And now we'll get to the best part. We'll get to our presentation. Today it's going to be led by Ennis Davis. He is our Florida Trust Board Member Vice President, and he is also the committee chair for the 11 to Save program. So Ennis, feel free to take it away.
All right, thank you, Jenny. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump right into this. All right, so you should see a split screen right now. I'm going to go to begin the slideshow. All right, and we're going to talk a little bit today about just the Florida Trust 11 to Save program, a brief overview of what it is, how we go through the nomination process, what we look for in terms of from the committee perspective on nominations. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the 11 to Save fund program, as well as share a few success stories through the 11 to Save program. So just to introduce myself a bit, so you know a little bit more about me and kind of what I'm into. I am an urban planner by trade. My background is in architecture. I'm a big Florida A&M fan, so that's where I attended the school. So that's why you see that logo sitting there. But I'm involved in several things. So I am the vice president of the Florida Trust Historic Preservation. I'm also the previous vice president for the APA, American Planning Association's Florida chapter. And I'm involved in a number of different boards, Groundwork Jacksonville, up in Jacksonville, which is where I'm based out of, as well as the Florida Avenue Main Street, which is Jacksonville's first Florida Main Street program. From a business perspective, I am the co-founder of Community Planning Collaborative, which is based out of Jacksonville, and it focuses really on the intersection of public policy, historic preservation, urban planning, and really economic development or with gentrification, which is the opposite of gentrification. We do a lot of work in historically excluded communities or communities that don't have necessary resources that many other communities do. We do have a nonprofit arm, Just Community Planning, as well to provide pro bono planning services for communities that can't afford professional planning consultant services. And then I am a writer, author, and a blogger. I have a media company here affiliated with NPR, the local PBS station here up in town, known as the Jackson. We write about local cultural heritage stories, neighborhood histories, and such up here in Jacksonville. Now, when I do these presentations, my business partner, Adrian Burke, a couple of years ago, she always said, it'd be good if you put a little bit about your own personal history as you do presentations. So I try to include personal history slides just so you'll understand my past and background as the things that we talk through. You're going to hear a lot that is a piece of Florida history as well. It's just the professional history side in the industries I'm involved with. I am a sixth generation Floridian. I am also a Gullah Geechee descendant. You'll see me as a little baby there in the upper left-hand side of the screen. But Gullah Geechee basically meaning descendants of Central and Western Africans came to the U.S. through the transatlantic slave trade. My mom's side of the family originally came from present-day Sierra Leone, were in South Carolina, and then as a result, the insurrection of Wilmington in 1898, which was a race riot, my great grandfather, who was a root doctor, Dr. Franklin Vereen, migrated south to Florida. My dad's side through Virginia, and then eventually coming to Florida, near present day, well, Walkeena, actually, that's the plantation name right there. So Walkeena, which is in Jefferson County, they eventually migrated south to where my parents met in Plant City. That's where my parents grew up, just outside of Tampa. So I always like to just show this slide just because I wouldn't be here today, even be able to give this presentation if it wasn't for the sacrifices of my ancestors that came before me. So what is the 11 to Save program? Well, in short, it's a program that we have with the Florida Trust that's built around our mission, which is to promote the preservation and the inclusive sharing of the diverse architectural, historical, and archaeological heritage of Florida. But this program really spotlights endangered properties that are threatened, historic properties throughout the state of Florida. We have this list that comes out annually, and we use it as a centerpiece of our education and advocacy initiatives for the year ahead. In addition, the main purpose of this program is to increase the public's awareness of the urgent need to save Florida's historical resources, and to also empower local preservationists and preservationist groups in their efforts to preserve that rich history. So briefly, how do you submit a nomination to the 11 to Save program? It's real easy, and Larry's going to drop a link to the Florida Trust website in the chat box, as well as the direct link to the 11 to Save application page. But it's a real easy 6-step process. Number one, you go to Florida Trust website, which is floridatrust.org. And on that top menu bar where it says Our Work, we're going to click on that and go to 11 to Save. Once we click on that 11 to Save page, it's going to pull up. We just scroll straight to the bottom of the 11 to Save page, and there's an online application form where you can nominate directly to us. Once you fill out that information, you just click, I believe it's an orange submit button at the bottom of that, and the trust staff is going to get your nomination and application. From that point, we generally, this is March, May, this is May 22nd. So we review applications annually. Our cutoff, and you can make a nomination at any point throughout the year. Our cutoff date for the 2025 11 to Save list is June the 1st. So about a week or so, a week and a half away. And then once we get that cutoff date of nominations, the 11 to Save committee, and we have you see the list of committee members here. While I am the chair, we do have Ruben Acosta with the Division of Historical Resources, Amy Angel out of Sarasota, Laura Bessinger Morse in West Palm Beach, Laura Lee Corbett in Tallahassee, Christine Dalton in Orlando, Orion Delane down in South Florida, Miami, and then Joseph Yates III in Rockledge, in Brevard County. We all meet twice in the month of June. So within the first 14 days of June, we'll meet. And what we do at that first meeting is, as a group, we review all the nominations that have been made over the course of a year prior to June the 1st. We also have conversation about each of these sites as well. Then at that point, we take the next few weeks as individuals to do additional research and review of all submissions. Sometimes we might reach out to that nominator if we need additional information, or there's some additional questions that the group would like for consideration of that site. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, each individual committee member is going to make some individual rankings that they will provide back to me, the chair. We'll go ahead and add those up. And there's going to be some sites that, all committee members say, hey, this should be on the 11 save list. If we got a majority, majority support there, overwhelming support, we won't even discuss those sites in that second meeting. Those sites are just kind of have made the list. And then what we'll do is, let's say 5 or 6 sites, everyone in the committee thought those were strong nominations. Those are going to end up being an 11 to save list. Then what we do in the second meeting is we then have a second combined meeting where we will go through to fill out the rest of the list and to go through the remaining nominations where there might be some questions or dissent between committee members. We work that process out. And at the end of that second meeting, we're going to have a finalized 11 to save list that will then be announced at this year's Palms Conference. So here's a look at last year's list. And you'll notice that from a location perspective, we have sites that are across the state. We really try hard to make sure we have some representation from each of our regional council districts. But as you fill out your nomination, it's also good to know what we're seeking for in terms of scoring criteria in that nomination. So what you see here on the left side of the screen is an 11 to save scorecard that was developed a few years ago. Each committee member is provided this scorecard, and there are a list of bullets. These bullets are here on the right side of the screen, where we're trying to rank to see where each of these sites meet, or do they align with the bullet points. So this could be historical significance of the property in connection with historical events, developments, and personalities. It could be compatibility with historic preservation priorities. We're looking at if this site contributes to the awareness of preservation and history of underappreciated or underserved communities as well. We want to make sure that this site demonstrates the potential for the trust to realistically further the property's future success. So when I mention realistically, we are a nonprofit. We have some staff, but the majority of our work is done on a volunteer basis. So if you needed funds to rehabilitate the Taj Mahal, for example, that's probably not something that we are directly going to be able to tap you into. However, if you need awareness, you need promotion that can help leverage funding or grants or things of that nature, that would be more of a realistic approach to kind of what we're doing. In addition, we want to make sure these sites demonstrate potential statewide awareness for education of the property and just historic preservation in general. We want to make sure that as we do this work, we're actually growing the trust in terms of visibility, outreach, and collaboration with other groups and industries. And I mentioned that in a while to how that ties into our 11 to Save fund program. And then we want to make sure these sites contribute to the diversity of historic properties in relation to geography, site types, and types of threats. So again, we want to make sure we have fairly equal representation across the state in terms of bringing awareness to our endangered historic sites. And then we might, also look at some additional contributing factors that may make an application more worthy or timely or critical. For example, we did have a site one year, um, and they actually ended up getting a Lebanon Save fund and basically fund grant, I guess you could say. And basically, what it was is it aligned their need. They needed to basically replace the roof in this large structure. That roof replacement project and the rehabilitation project was going to run them about 3 million or so. But just to get them over the hump, it was important to be able to just get the roof in a place where it wasn't going to continue to um, damage the integrity or interior of the structure. So that fit in alignment with the Lebanon Save grant fund program in terms of the amount of funds we had at that point to assist. And so we ended up giving that the Lebanon Save site a grant to move forward with that work right away as a temporary solution to ultimate rehabilitation of that large structure. So once we get through all of this, we're going to have our Lebanon Save list. And so this year we'll have that list kind of figured out, recommended list by the end of June. We'll make that recommendation to the Florida Trust Board and staff. The staff is then going to reach out to each of the sites that are officially nominated prior to the official announcement. But that official announcement this year, I believe, is going to be on July the 17th, and that's going to be at our Preservation on Main Street conference, which is up in Fernandina Beach this year. Once we get past the conference and we're bringing awareness to these new sites that are on the Lebanon Save list, in August, the committee is going to get back together. And what we'll do is we'll assign an ambassador to work with each nominated site. And what that ambassador program is, or what their role is for that ambassador or individual to be a conduit, a connection between that site and the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. Basically, it's eyes on the ground, keeping the board and staff informed. You might be reaching out for some additional information that we may be able to have. It could be around potential ways to advocate or potential grants that might be available. It could be, having us provide, letters of support for grants for right now. I mean, right now we're getting a big list of letters of support for the small matching and special category grant windows that are open right now that actually close in about a week as well. And then, who can that ambassador be? It could be the site nominated themselves. It could also be an Lebanon Save committee member, or it could even be a Florida Trust staff member. So really, it's just, if you're passionate about this site, you're tied into it, and you're in a position where you can keep the trust informed and in the loop with assistance for its preservation and rehabilitation, you could be an ambassador. So a few success stories in the Lebanon Save program. Over the last recent years, I would say that the Thelma Bolton Center in Gainesville is one. Thelma Bolton Center was in the 2023 Lebanon Save list. It was built in 1942, dedicated in 1943. It was a servicemen's center during World War II. And at that particular time, when it was nominated to the Lebanon Save program, the Gainesville City Commission voted to demolish most of the building and to construct a larger addition in this place. Through awareness, through just economic numbers, and a push for this building, City of Gainesville ended up changing their minds a few months later, and now the plan is to rehabilitate the building to continue the use that it has today. Another success story was the Opelika City Hall building down in Miami-Dade County. Um, for a number of years, this building was in a pretty rough situation and condition. There had been attempts to rehabilitate the structure over a course of several years. That it start and stop, and it failed. But it's Opelika is internationally known for its Moorish revival style of architecture from the Florida land boom. This particular structure was built in 1926 and added to the National Register in 1982. But at the time, we ended up adding it to the 11 to Save program. Um, we assisted the community there with bringing more awareness. They were awarded, I believe it was the African American Cultural and Historical Grant through the state of Florida a few years back. And time flies. I was actually on that grant review panel. But they were awarded a grant for restoration, and finally, after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, they did complete the restoration of their city hall building in earlier this year. Another success story, and one that really even surprised us. I mean, this was in American Beach, South Shore Community Center, but it was added to our program in 2021. It is associated with the well-known famed architect Morris Lapidus, completed in 1969. So mid-century structure there in the middle of a city where you got high-rise condos and everything popping up all over the place. At the time, there was the threat of demolition for a new fire station. Um, the community really loves this building. It has a special place in the history of Miami Beach. But since that time, and really, I want to say the last 6 to 12 months or so, the city of Miami Beach decided to preserve and restore this structure as opposed to the original plan, which was to demolish it. So I could share a lot more success stories, but those are three quick ones. But what I want to talk about now is the 11 to Save program. Um, while we've had the 11 to Save program, the 11 to Save fund was launched in fall 2022. And one of the reasons we launched this grant program, because yes, while the 11 to Save program itself is about raising awareness and being advocates for our endangered sites, we also want to create a program where we could put some tangible, financial and targeted financial assistance into 11 to Save properties throughout the state. So from an eligibility perspective, the only sites that are eligible for this particular grant program is you have to be an 11 to Save site. That could be you're applying this year and you end up being 11 to Save site in July, but it also applies to 11 to Save sites that were nominated in previous years. So if you were nominated in 2013 and you're 11 to Save site, you still are in need of grant assistance or funds, you are eligible to apply for this program. Our application window annually opens somewhere in the month of September, and that window is going to close in late October. And on the screen here, you'll see one of our first awards of that 22 initial grant year was Noah's Ark, which is a historic steamboat in Palaco in the St. Johns River. So, sometimes the site isn't actually a building. I mean, it could be, something like a steamboat as well. So once we get our applications in for the 11 to Save grant fund program, you should also think about what makes a competitive and strong application. So this is our ranking matrix for applications we receive. And so just using this as a sample scenario, let's assume we got 5 applications, applications A through E. The criteria that we're trying to rank on the scale of 1 to 5, 5 being best, 1 being worst. We're looking at historical significance. We're looking at the urgency or endangerment for that site. We're looking at the budget of what you're asking for as for this grant, or how this grant fits into the overall project budget. We're also looking at timeline because we, with this grant program, we want to get funds out as quick as possible, and we like to make sure that whatever the applicant is seeking is something that can be completed, largely completed within the 12-month window. We're also looking for educational, economic, and community impact in terms of these sites. We're going to look at the administrative, technical, and financial resources of the organization that's submitting an application as well. And then we want to make sure that there's some demonstrated ability of the applicant to complete the project within the timeline that is specified in the application. So the committee, the committee goes through and they're going to rank each site. It's going to spit out a number towards the end, and that eventually ends up becoming the rankings. So in this potential scenario, application E ends up ranking a little more, or application B and E end up ranking similarly. And then we might have a discussion there. We've had some years where we've taken grant funds and we've split grant funds to fund 2 programs. And then we've had some years where there was an application that stood out much stronger than the rest in terms of what we could leverage for that preservation, and that applicant ended up getting the entire grant for that particular year. So I did mention Noah's Ark. Some other award winners over the last few years include the Opahonka Rosenwald School up in I want to say it's Sumter County near Leesburg and Community Royal, not too far away. They're in the process of rehabilitating their structure now. So even though they got that grant in 2022, they are an example where we have extended that grant program to better align with some of the financial realities of rehabilitating historic structure. Mount Olive AME, African Methodist Episcopal Church up in the east side of Jacksonville, was also awarded a 2023 award. That is a structure where we basically assisted them in patching up the roof to keep the building from further deterioration while they were working with the city of Jacksonville and some other resources to put on a new roof for the structure. Central Academy last year, that is in Palatka, and then Green Gables was awarded some grant funds last year as well. Green Gables is down near Melbourne, down in Brevard County. So again, as I come to a close, I'm going to take questions in a few minutes here, but I just want to circle back again and talk about how to submit a nomination. We've got roughly a week and a half before this grant cycle application window ends. We love to get as many applications from across the state as possible. So definitely go to the Florida Trust website. Click on that All Work tab in the menu bar. It's going to take you to the 11 to Save page. You'll have some background information. You can read about the 11 to Save program as well as 11 to Save grant fund. I believe it even has links to previous years, so you can get an idea of what sites were selected to the 11 to Save program in previous years and why they were selected. And then if you keep scrolling down to the bottom, you're going to be able to submit a nomination for your site by filling in the blanks and answering the questions towards the bottom of the page. And when you're all done with that, you just click submit, and it's going to come to the trust staff, and they're going to get it over to the committee for consideration for this year's grant this year's 11 to Save the List announcement, which is going to take place on July the 17th at the Preservation of Main Street Conference. So I'm going to take questions and answers and try to answer. But if you need to contact me outside of our time here online together, you can reach me on my email at ennis@planningcolab.com. Or you can reach through to our company phone number here at area. Well, did it say area code anymore? I don't even know. But 904-577-0255. That'll get you direct contact with me. But you can also reach out directly to our Florida Trust CEO and President, Melissa Wiley. Her email is mwiley@floridatrust.org. You can also visit our website, and then our number to the office in Tallahassee is 850-224-8228. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to shut up and just try to answer any questions or comments anyone may have. And as well, my background is in a variety of areas around preservation and just development, or community advocacy. So I may be able to answer some questions that might have nothing to do with the program, but might be like, even without the program, what can we do to preserve the sites that we love so much.
Great, Ennis. Thank you so much. We have about 25 minutes for questions and discussions, so I think that's a great opportunity. We have some questions in here already. But I do just want to thank you for sharing with us the nomination process and really being transparent about the rankings, as well as the grant process. I think that's something that people want to understand. And just one question I'd like to talk about before we get into individual questions, because I think some people feel like nomination process is really intensive and, it might be difficult and cumbersome. Can you just give an estimate of how much time you think it takes to make a nomination and how much writing really needs to be involved?
I would say maybe 10 minutes tops. With the nomination process for the 11 to Save list itself, as well as the grant application process, we made a real effort to streamline the process from the traditional grants that most people see. So I would say probably like 10 minutes.
Yeah, so essentially it's like a form. You answer a few questions and then it goes into the committee for review, and then you may follow up with some additional questions.
And I would also say, if there's questions that are being asked that you may not know, I mean, you can also just reach out to us too, and we can fill in the blank. I can say I personally have worked with nominators over the last few years where I've helped them fill out the form and directed them to the information as well.
Yep, very good. All right, well, we do have some questions. I see Georgia Katz is with us. Hey, Georgia. I think we might have answered it, but she was wondering if there was a limitation on the number of pages of support or a word count if you're submitting an application.
That is a good question.
Can you include attachments as well?
But you can't. But you can include attachments. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Jenny.
Hey.
Hi.
Do you have more questions you want to add to? I know that there's several people here who are interested in a particular site, so feel free to come off mute if you want to ask specific questions or more questions.
Where do we get a model, like a successful model of prior applications?
That's a good question. I would say because we also don't want to give people's personal information away. I would say, oh, you've seen if somebody's
Yeah.
application, but we try not to give people's personal information away. I would say what you could do is just you could work with either staff or reach out
Yeah.
to me directly, and
Okay.
we could work with you to make sure that you fill in the
Okay.
blanks. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Also, I heard to that end, and you can clarify if I'm saying this right, Ennis. It sounds like if you have a really broad and deep community support, that kind of gets fast-tracked from the committee review process. Is that what I heard?
No. So what kind of happens is, and it's not anything complicated. Let's say we need 11 sites and we got 25 applications. We're going to review those 25 applications together. We're going to have conversations. Some people are going to, there may be a site that is around the corner from someone's house. That committee member can provide us a little more information outside of the application. We're then going to take that conversation and then we're individually going to spend a few weeks doing our own individual research on those sites. We may be following up, and then I basically send out what's essentially like a doodle poll, or you're going to have each of the sites, and it's going to say, "Hey, community member number one, from 1 to 11, rank the 11 sites out of the 25 that you think, based off your review, ranks higher." And then each committee member is going to come with their own list of 11 sites. We then have staff combine all that. And then some site, if it's got, let's say you got 10, let's say you had 10 committee members and all 10 members rank that site, it's going to have a score of, 10. And if we have 5 or 6 sites, this is how it normally lines up. You're going to end up with 5 or 6 or 7, somewhere that's going to have some general support from almost every committee member. So when we come back to that, our second meeting where we need to finish out the 11 to say the full list, if everyone supports those, every committee member, supports 5 or 6 straight up, we don't really need to spend time talking about those 5 or 6. We're going to take our time and focus on the rest of the list and why someone in that committee may feel it should not be on the list versus something else. And we're going to spend our time working through that to get to that full list of 11.
Great. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Another question that we have in the chat before anyone raises their hand or comes off mute is, do privately owned businesses qualify if the building has cultural significance, though current owners may or may not be interested or may not support preserving the building?
All right, so let me understand this right. And we're saying qualify as an 11 to save listing, or so for the listing, yes, you can. Most sites are going to be private, so
And
yes,
they're
you
not going
can.
to be necessarily that private owner applying for the
Correct.
designation. It's going to be a public, someone unaffiliated with ownership of that place.
Correct. Yes, we have examples of um, communities or organizations or individuals, historic preservation groups, where they applied for sites where a developer may own a site and wants to tear it down. And we've designated those sites as 11 to save sites.
And I will say that the Florida Trust pivoted a number of years ago. We used to call this program the 11 Most Endangered, and to try to make it more welcoming and less, more carrots and less of a sticks approach. We changed it to the 11 to save to try to put a positive spin. Like the idea is not to say, wow, you're not taking care of your building. It's to say that this is a property really worth saving. So we try to put that, that's how we feel about it. And we provide the support following the designation to do that. So hopefully the property owners will learn something and want to come on board, but obviously that's not always the case.
Yeah, I can talk from the angle, and I could also talk from the angle, the community angle. Sometimes you got to ruffle some feathers out there from the community angle.
Yeah.
We've had great success with that, with a number of historic African American communities that have struggled through like urban renewal here in Jacksonville. And we do have examples of communities where the trust did. La Villa is a good example of this. They were an 11 to Save site, the whole district, in 2020. And since that time, it's been the development community in that area that has put up the funds to update the neighborhood survey, and they're putting up the funds in an effort to have the entire what's left of the neighborhood designated as National Register Historic District. They didn't want to wait for the city; it's too many politics involved. But the developers, they actually saw the value of even tax credits, or the nonprofits saw the value of grants in the community. Saw the value of preservation, and quite frankly, it was like either you can work with us together, and we can have a revitalized community that features preservation of what we have left and compatible infill, or we can make your life a living nightmare and we just wake up with nothing else better to do but put you out of business. And so the development community in that case decided, hey, we'd rather just work with you. And if you want to be on a national register, we can front the money for that. If you're making a $50 million infill development project, funneling 50,000 or 100,000 to go through a survey and national register nomination is pennies in the bucket, especially when the city might be giving you big incentives to do the project anyways.
Yeah, I think that's really been a really best case scenario. And there's also one that Adrian had mentioned earlier in here, a success story from Pensacola, where it was the Gibson School, and the city then ended up purchasing it, is now applying for special category and National Register designation. So there are lots of potential opportunities that the Florida Trust can help you navigate, and we would, definitely work with private developers to help make that happen.
Oh, certainly if the Gibson School is applying, because that was 11 to Save site last year, make sure you get at least a letter of support from us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Special category grants are due June 1st.
Yep,
So,
number right around the corner.
yeah,
That's great to know. I'll be emailing you after this webinar.
Okay.
great.
I got a list myself that I have to do tomorrow. So and yeah, if we the trust, and I mean even us as individuals in this space and companies in this space, we're more than happy to provide letters of support and for the preservation of your sites.
Excellent. Great. Sally, I don't know if you want to come off mute to ask your question about structural engineers and resources for finding someone to hire to help you in your case for an endangered building.
Right. We have a specific property in the Volano Beach area that had been threatened with demolition a few years back. We stopped that successfully, but now the threat is imminent again. And the discourse that is being provided is that the building is structurally unsound. Right now, we have not seen the developer's report contending that it is structurally unsound, although it is very occupied at present with renters and so forth. Very functional building. So, is there a listing of historic preservation structural engineers to assess and evaluate anything submitted by this particular developer, or to be able to provide an independent evaluation of the structure that is so-called falling apart?
Okay, I might not be the best person to answer that, but this is a question that we have, received. I've received recently in some uh, other presentations, it is something that I think, we as the trust should probably start, looking into developing the list. Like I personally can't give you a list, but we do have enough people around on the trust that we probably could build out some type of resource list. And maybe Jenny might know more than me, but that is a resource that I think is important.
I will go ahead and chime in on that, Sally, with the disclaimer that this is not in any way representing the Flora Trust perspective, but harking back on my days as when I worked for the city of St. Augustine,
Right.
during the rehabilitation of the historic waterworks building, um, and you could ask the city this, we hired an engineer and an architect, and we work closely with them. One is out of Jacksonville, Atlantic Engineering Services,
Okay,
Jude,
good.
Jude Kostic
Okay.
in particular. And then there's also there was another case that the city was hire or not didn't hire, but a volunteer preservation architect came in and did an assessment of a building from a property owner that was seeking demolition. And that architect was based in Gainesville. And there's several over there that, they're not too far from St. Augustine. Bill Warner and if you look at the Gainesville Historic Preservation Board, there's a couple architects on there.
Okay, great.
So I would look
Yeah,
there.
yeah. We've got a couple of locals that I've been communicating with, Thomas and Ocon. So they're available, but I don't know the professional or technical distinction between an engineering versus an architectural assessment. So all we want to do is establish that that building is not falling around around people's ears. And does that require an architect versus an engineer, or does it matter?
I
I mean, you
think the
need.
engineer is stronger, but I don't know like which one outranks supersedes the other.
I
Okay.
mean, I would just say go to a structural engineer that
Yeah.
knows
Okay.
historic preservation.
Gotcha.
And that's something, and that wouldn't help you all necessarily right now, but in the future, when the grant cycle is open for the 11 to Save, that is something that the fund would be excellent for to help
Right.
hire someone to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
So, all right, do we have some other questions? I don't think I saw any in the chat that I've missed. So how much money is available in us? And how many
Good.
applications do we usually get?
Good question. So, I mean, how many applications? I'm gonna say last year we may have gotten around like 5 or 6 last year. So, and we ended up awarding 2 sites. So, it's not like the DHR grant where the state might be getting hundreds. So, you got a much better chance of, and you also the pool is very limited because it's only 11 to save sites. So you got a better chance of receiving grant funds. This year, I don't know about how much. I hadn't checked to see how much is in the program at this point. The first year we started, and it was really just seed money. All we had at that time was about 5,000. What we have done each year, and there's a reason we announce. Oh yeah, we also announced the grant winner on Giving Tuesday. The reason is we're growing this fund as well. So we seeded it with money in 2022, and each year has gotten higher and higher and higher. And actually, when we take even take this past year, I guess we ended up awarding funds to 2 sites. But the money that we did have at that point in time, we didn't give it all away. So each year you're trying to grow it, and then by announcing on Giving Tuesday, it actually helps with funnel donations into that pot to get it bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know if that helps you because I hadn't looked at. I don't know what the count is right now, but The first year, a few years ago, it was 5,000. That was the lowest. But that was the beginning, and each year has grown, 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 grown.
And I'm trying to find the link and I'll put it in the chat, but you can either donate to that fund directly from our website or be an 11 to Save sponsor at Preservation on Main Street, which is $111. And just with that small amount, that money goes directly into the 11 to Save program. Anyone else have other questions? We've got just a couple more minutes here.
A simple question. Are
Yes.
private residences eligible?
Can you speak up? I'm not sure. Maybe Ennis, you heard that, but I couldn't hear very well.
So, are private residences eligible for the 11 to Save site, 11 Save list? We have had private residences that have been listed in the past.
It is possible. I thought it was maybe just like public realm properties.
No, lion's share of our historic resources are actually private. So if the history is significant enough, and there's passion around community, is important to that community. Yes, there's a possibility that even that private site can be listed to 11 Save.
So the owner of a historic residence can put in an application then.
Yeah, for consideration, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sorry about that. I was just finding I had to go through a thread to find the links. So I've got those two links in there for you. And I think, Ken, I'm not sure some of what some people do here is that the state grant programs, you must be a nonprofit or a government entity. And then also, which other avenue is limited to public or nonprofits?
Well, so that would be the grant program. So it depends on what you're asking. If you're asking, can a private property apply to be an 11 to Save site? Yes. There are some, and I don't have the grant criteria for the 11 to Save fund in front of me at this point, but I do believe that is also nonprofit, or in terms of application to the fund, like for cash. I'll put it that way. I do think that has to be like a nonprofit with through the 11 to Save fund program. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure.
We'll follow up after this.
Yeah, we can follow up. Yeah.
And we'll send an email out to all the attendees to clarify that.
Yeah. And I don't
Any
remember
other
if you answered this
questions?
one. I saw one from Debbie where it says, do you also support finding solutions to work with developers to help them want to preserve? Yes. Short question there. Short answer, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Thank you.
thanks for joining us, Debbie. Okay, well, I think I will wrap it up with that. I appreciate our conversation, all y'all's questions. They've been very helpful for us and the group so that we can understand some of what you're considering when you apply for this. And just remember, you can always reach out to Ennis directly or Melissa. Anyone at the Florida Trust will be happy to get you the answers you need, and just don't feel intimidated by the process. But thank you so much again for joining us. And we also want to thank our sponsor again, the GBX Group. And if you or your company is interested in sponsoring a future Lunch and Learn, please let us know. If you're not a member of the Florida Trust, please consider joining today for access to these webinars and many other great benefits, like our newly launched Preservation Passport program. Laura Glenn would be happy to tell you all about that. And we do hope you'll join us Thursday, June 26th for our next installment of the Lunch and Learn series. We will celebrate the beginning of hurricane season by having a discussion about what you can do to get your historic home to be storm ready. So thank you for attending today, and please share any links to our YouTube channel so you can follow up on any missed sessions. We just really appreciate you. Take care, everyone.